Ah, welcome. Come in, come in. It's good to see you again. You want to know my name? Ah, I have told you before and will tell you again, though you will not remember when you wake. You say you have never been here. Oh, but it is familiar, is it not? I'll come to the Dream Emporium night after night. Look around at your leisure. Something calls to you, do not hesitate to hold on to it. These are often fleeting things and slip through your fingers like so much sand with only the smallest grains as reminders. But if you keep searching, you may find a gem for all time. If you are looking for something specific, tonight is your lucky night. Discounts for all timeless favorites. Lights of Fancy 50% off. Old Flames down to 80. One can never go wrong with the old reliables, always in stock. Or perhaps you wish for something more personal. We also offer custom creations, made right here by the best spinners of imaginative thought. Fate and fortunes forged at your command. Use a template or start with a fresh slate. There are a variety of options at your disposal. Color and grayscale with sound and without. Build your very own temporary soulmate. Spark your next waking idea. Visit the worlds of your choosing from the comforts of your own bed. No task is too large, but be careful. Grand dreams are unwieldy and liable to crumble at the faintest outside force. It is disappointing to lose a grand adventure at the slightest crumple of your sheets, but that is the risk you take each time you close your eyes. Find the weighty tasks are best reserved for the half moments, those extra few minutes after the first slap of the alarm or the tossings of a humid evening. Some customers are wary of paying for such services, but those that do are often surprised at their vibrancy. Do I dream? As certainly as any other. A favorite? Oh, I have none. Each is special to me, an orb of wonder that holds untold mystery until cracked open, the excitement of what waits within new and incredible each time. I sometimes wander through these shelves only to pluck some wayward afterthought at random, eager to explore what lies within. Though I do not often get the chance to relish them. After all, a weaver's work is never done so long as people sleep. I see you are looking at the products in the shadows. Don't be alarmed. They are not off limits. On the contrary, the darker thoughts are no less important to a full life than the whimsical. What chills us in the daylight hours may beckon us in the night. You would not think people willingly browse through nightmares, but that is all the more reason they exist. You want to meet a lost relative who judges your every step? Spiders and insects are always in vogue. Maybe you crave a sensation more ethereal, a creeping awareness that the world is somehow wrong, though you can never place why. Rarely enjoyed at the time, these dreams have their place as fuel for thoughts. Imagine a world without tales of horror. That to me is far more terrifying. Meaning? Why, of course, dreams aren't required to hold meaning. There's nothing wrong at all with the nonsensical. I've sold talking oaks that sang like Japanese idols and balloons that smelled of cherries. We once crafted a tea house in space. To be honest, we haven't figured out how to fix numbers after all of these years either. Clocks and math tests always lead down a strange path for slumbering. Once again, though, I must add a caveat. Strange dreams can hold power over the waking as much as any other. You may rise to find yourself in love with someone you barely knew from your past, or liable to take on great expense at a passing hobby. Choose your threads wisely. Coming close to a decision? I don't mean to rush, but our shop is only offered for a limited time to each person each night. What happens beyond that, I cannot say. Mine does real. Your payment? Only some small pieces of yourself that linger behind in a haze. Do not worry, they are forgotten with a few bats of the eyelashes. Most of the time, anyway. Ah, a fine choice. Your dissatisfaction is guaranteed, for the best dreams will leave you wanting more. I do hope you take care. Our shop is always open, and we're certain to see you again soon. That was The Dream Emporium, one that I wrote a few years ago for a class. Always been fascinated by the power of stories and particularly the dreams that can inspire them. We all get inspiration from all sorts of places, I think. For some of us, it's dreams, and for some of us, it's music. Others we don't even really know. They appear out of nowhere. Maybe it's something we saw on the way to work that day, or perhaps something we remembered from our past. Whatever the case, I think stories can hold a lot of meaning, not just for other people, but for us as well. So, welcome to my story time, friends. This is going to be a new experience. I have never read stories here on stream before, and to be quite honest, I don't know how this is going to go. But I am hopeful that you'll enjoy our little jaunts around the mines of imagination. As I said, not everything comes necessarily from flights of fancy or imaginative worlds, although I do certainly enjoy those. Sometimes the stories come from around us, things that we see and things that we'd feel in our everyday lives. For my next one, I wrote this one night in a 24-hour diner. It's called Life Over Breakfast. And I won't tell you what it's about, but I hope you'll pick up the meaning on it here pretty soon. It is a love letter to those of us that enjoy where we are, who believe that places also have spirits. Life Over Breakfast. It began with French toast. I'd been staving off work all evening, waking up, drudging through the labyrinth of the city, putting on a plastered smile. It was all a necessity, not a passion. Perhaps in another life I had pursued what mattered, but that was another life and I could only live my own. So I avoided it, purposely fatiguing myself to ensure that each day I arrived my distaste would be palpable to those around me in silent protest of failed dreams. Despite the ever-growing hour and the impending awakening, I had no desire for sleep. Night called, as it often did, pulling me under its sway until I could do little but surround myself with its presence. I rarely ignored that call, and that night it demanded breakfast at midnight. I arrived at the local diner, radio tuned to classic disco for reasons beyond the universe's comprehension. The world demanded Barry White, and I heeded it as a soul born of nostalgia from a time I barely knew. It was the middle of the week, and I was among the only patrons, seated by a gentle soul the likes of which are only found working the overnight shift at all hours cafes. A woman chatted from her booth to one of the servers, an obvious friend. Behind me, a hipster couple in matching square-framed glasses tried to embrace through folds of leather. We were the only diners. I had craved French toast, and it was exactly as promised. Somewhere before I arrived, I promised myself to avoid the temptation of electronics, allowing myself to sit and think, as I used to in college, when such excursions were a regular occurrence. So I sat alone, over coffee that did little to fend off the creeping acre of black thoughts. But it was good coffee, and the air was clean and filled, somehow, with more disco. I left 30% for the waiter. As I nudged the exit, the night magic happened. A woman, a lost soul of her own, nearly bumped into the glass panel in her inattention. We laughed and moved to switch places, only to glance back at each other with our passing. I probably can't drink a whole thing of coffee on my own, she said in an awkward tremble. I knew the feeling. I accepted. The waiter gave me a subtle wink as he sat us in a quiet corner near the windows. I don't think there were others like me, I noted, doing my best to act suave, though my heart beat hard enough to make my fingers tremble. I dared not pick up my cup at first, lest she notice. At least not in this city. Sometimes you just need coffee and a Nutella crepe, she answered. We stared out the window, lost in the wonder of the city outside. Sometimes we stared at each other. She was a sketch of contrasts, with skin that glowed under fluorescent lights and trimmed black hair that absorbed it. Thick, serious eyebrows belied cunning humor and sharp wit. Whatever I had been pondering before her arrival had given way to companionship. Sometimes I think people misunderstand the city, she said. Everyone calls it noisy and stressful, like it's torture to live here amid the chaos. Why would you do that to yourself, people ask. And they come up with some lame excuse about jobs or culture or whatever. But they haven't seen my city. A city of lights falling on quiet streets, buildings shining as sentinels to our sanity, house parties at 1 a.m. where everyone talks in whispers while a dude jams on an acoustic guitar, and someone managed to bring a portable hookah. We can go to the beach, to the urban jungle, and to the desert in one night if we wanted. Or get coffee and crepes at midnight, I interjected. The girl nodded with stars in her eyes. Yeah, or get coffee at midnight. We let the moment sink in. I thought for a moment before asking, what brought you to the city? It seemed a lame question, a common question in hindsight, and I regretted asking it. She did not seem to mind. No, in fact, she seemed to choose her answer carefully, as though the future hinged on her words. It doesn't matter what brought me here, I guess. No one ever ends up doing what they say brought them here. It's what keeps us here that's important. What keeps you here? Stubbornness, mostly, I laughed. In reality, I don't rightfully know. Some love I can't explain, the pull and allure of being both alone and surrounded by all the people of the earth. I know what you mean, she nodded, and we were silent, sipping on our caffeine. The hipster couple left, and unlike my first visit, I did not envy them this time. Casey and the Sunshine Band told us how they liked it. Not always easy, though, I admitted. Sometimes I'm not sure if I love the city or the concept of a city. Maybe the idea of skyscrapers and people is more exciting than actually living in it. We have all these ideas of what things are like before we move here, and it's jarring to see the truth. The rent, the driving, the grind. I feel like sometimes we'll never make it, and that every day is just another struggle. He smirked at me and raised an eyebrow in a knowing glance. Are you alive? Yeah, last I checked. Then you've made it. I laughed at the simplicity of those words, but I could not argue. Suppose you're right. If nothing else, I have stories no one else can tell. That counts for something. Cities are a lot like people. They have personalities and souls, she said. They can be fickle and condescending, but they can also thrive and live when given the right push. They're the collective conscious of people who live in them and the creativity of the people breathe. I don't think people choose where they live. I think they're drawn to the cities that have chosen them. Otherwise, you'd be somewhere else. It was my turn to raise an eyebrow. Does that mean I can tell your personality too? She sat back and stared out the window with the few passing cars filled with other restless minds. I am this city, and this city is me. Our love is shared, and what will be, will be. When it was time to go, we held hands in the parking lot where we kissed and held each other until we were almost one. When we parted, she laughed and turned and began walking down the street with no car or aim in mind. Will I see you again? I called to her, unwilling to let the night end. She smiled and twirled out her arms as she looked at the twinkling lights of the offices above. I'm always around, she called back before she disappeared around the corner. The city called me into the night once again. Thank you. There's another one. I wasn't sure how it would turn out, but sometimes it takes being in an IHOP at 3 o'clock in the morning to really get those ideas out. It's all about the space. Now, not every story that I have that is based on cities necessarily has a happy ending. Along those lines, I think that when we start to reflect on the places we've lived and the places we've gone, where we're at in life now versus where we are back then, I think it gives us the broader perspective. Allows us to see both the good and the bad, and be honest, sometimes stories are melancholy. Sometimes they have no happy endings, and sometimes they do. And sometimes, like in this story, it just cause us to think. Sometimes that's what stories are all about, right? It's putting your thoughts to paper and lets you express the things that you're uncertain of how to say in your everyday life. This one is called Funny Man and written for a class a couple of years ago. A short one, but I think you'll like it. Funny Man by me. 2 o'clock on the dot, the screams began. My co-workers unlocked the pen holding the audience, and we started the long march across the studio. Sunlight bounced off every inch of its concrete and asphalt acreage, turning those of us trapped there into walking bacon. The crowd did not mind. They walked in a line as we traversed through the streets between bulky sand-colored temples. Kept an eye out for anyone trying to run, but no one ever did. They were too dazed to think of running. The audience, on their way to an hour-long brush with celebrity, chattered amongst themselves like nervous raccoons. There were more of them than usual, a parade of orange shirts and man buns hyped up on promises of a summer concert during each taping that week. Sometimes they would throw their hands up with rocker horns and shout at me as they passed. "You have the coolest job in the world, dude." "Pretty cool," I said and waved them on with my traffic baton. Once everyone was inside, security closed the soundstage door. The raucous cheers vanished with a heavy thud. Normalcy returned with the buzzing of electric golf carts and Grip sneaking cigarettes between takes. I increasingly identified with those men and their pockets full of Marlboros. Hopped onto the seat of my own golf cart, joining them in complacency. Imagined for a while that if a person stayed employed enough on the studio lot for an undetermined amount of time, they evolved into Grips. The thousands of starry-eyed Midwesterners like myself had come to Los Angeles on a dream and woken up one day to find themselves suddenly knowledgeable about box trucks and the safest ways to make something explode on set. That was my fate. I accepted it. From across the narrow street, someone strummed a guitar, and I sat up. There I saw him standing there. In the cool shadow next to his stage, he warmed his fingers across the strings, a red-headed giant of comedy that filled seats day after day. He would join them soon, on the stage with his guests, a hurricane of vaudevillian comedy. For now, he hid away from the roar of the crowds and confines of security. Here, his only barrier was a faint yellow box of a parking space that nothing trespassed save for a slow melody. The side entrance to the stage popped open, and a young intern wearing a headset stepped out. He muttered a few words to the host as the sounds of cheers and a pulsing bass line thundered through the crack in the stage's armor. The host nodded and followed the intern inside. The door closed. I laid back down in my seat. It was quiet in the avenue again. I could still hear him strumming away. Thank you. Honest, I am not sure if the sounds of traffic coming out help or hinder this story time reading. But given how many stories we've had about cities, I suppose it adds some ambiance. My apologies. Of course, not everything that I have is ultimately going to be personal fiction or anything like that. Like so many others, I'm drawn to stories of fantasy, of other worlds, and escapism. I've said many a times that most of my books are, well, they're meant to be enjoyed. They're meant to help people escape and explore other parts of the world that maybe they don't have a chance to visit. It's kind of where this next one came from. Another story that I wrote for a class a few years ago, but I thought about what it was like writing as a child, and obviously I spent my time in the fan fiction mines like so many others, but I enjoyed those times. I think as we grow older, sometimes we tend to overthink our writing. It becomes a business and it becomes a thing that you have to calculate and plot and market. So I wanted to write something that was a little bit more familiar to childhood me. This one is called Dreams from a Notebook. I had a journal once. My mother gave it to me in the troubled times when luck was scarce. Write down your dreams, she said. Maybe it will help you when you feel lonely. I stared at it, with its shiny black binding and infinite possibilities. It was not big, but it had no lines, no restrictions. I cherished it, my little black notebook, a thing to call my own. I thanked my mother and began to dream as I had never dreamed before. First thing I dreamed was a dragon, all big and emerald and shy. It was very important that he was shy, for he was not an evil dragon, but he knew what frightful things humans can do when they are afraid. He whispered to me from the back of my closet, hidden between my uniform skirts and a Christmas sweater gone too small. He protected me from the shadows, my dragon, and in turn I told him of the world outside. Sometimes in the quiet hours, he pulled me onto his back and we explored our realm from above. Give him a home, I dreamed up a forest. On the wings of my dragon, we discovered secrets hidden beneath its canopy. Our forest was warm and rainy with leaves the size of my head and spiders of equal measure. There was no night in our forest, but it hardly needed it. Beneath the trees, everything turned dark anyway. At our forest's heart, a temple rose from days forgotten when magic still held sway over the land. It was protected by tiny men with poisonous spears. We appeased them with plastic baubles from Macy's, and they allowed us to witness ancient rituals within golden-clad halls. In times when the dragon slept, I dreamed of the desert and a city of pyramids. There I befriended a mummy, all rags and yellow bones. I am cursed, the mummy wailed, to forever live but never to love. I told him I would help him, and together we scoured the sands in search of a cure. We explored tombs and temples until we found an oasis with a beautiful sphinx who loved everyone and everything. I was kidnapped once, for a night, held ransom by 3 cats. They promised hurtful things and purring voices if their demands were not met. I only escaped because of a laser pointer on my keychain. I also dreamed of the future. I became councilwoman of New York, charged to oversee a sprawling city of glowing nights and cars resembling dragonflies. The war ended between Earth and Venus, and little green men revealed themselves from beneath their home's toxic clouds. We grew close, our planets, discovering new frontiers and bringing humankind up to speed with the rest of the galaxy. In my journal, I dreamed of simple things, of Midwest pastures and a boy who played baseball whom himself dreamed big. I'm gonna be a Yankee one day, he said to me, and I believed him. We played catch in a starlight meadow, and I understood what it was to love. I met a jazz musician in those dreams. His eyes faded behind thick glasses, but his tongue was sharp as a knife. He told me of Chet Baker and the Duke. I listened as he spilled his soul into a trumpet, a special solo just for me. That dream I wrote for him. The journal held nightmares, too. They came from tears and rage and frustration. Man in white pursued me for months, conjured from a mind that had forgotten dragons and mummies and little green men. He scared me, always following but never getting too close. He just stared and stared and stared. I dreamed I drowned and sank down to the deeps with the things that lurked under their bed and in dark men's hearts. I tried to end that dream, but it still held me under the seas as the hours ticked away. There were worse dreams than that. Those pages are gone. I filled that notebook with dreams until I could dream no more. They faded with time and knowledge of a tangible world. My little black journal waited patiently for me as I turned to boys and clothes and notebooks that were filled with many other things, but not with dreams. Rested, covered by stickers and hearts, with the dragon in the closet. My mother told me one day of a move to a different place and a different life, though I had already lived several lives by then. In the world that came after, the notebook stayed behind. I hope my journal was found, but not for me. Or heck, perhaps the next young girl will take its pages, and together they will dream again. Thank you. For my next one, it is a bit of a work in progress. To be honest, I don't read too many short stories. I don't write too many short stories, nor do I write a whole lot of poetry. But find that sometimes, whenever you're writing something longer, like a novel, big time book, it can help to take some of those individual chapters and write them as if they are a short story. It can give you focus and allows you to be a little bit more careful with your words, which can help out in the long run. It can be hard to do that over the course of an entire book, but for things like prologues, your first chapters, it helps to put those dreams to pages, I think. This one, of course, is a work in project, a work in progress from a future project. I don't think this part will change all that much, but I am still working on the rest of it. Only 70,000 words to go. For one, she stood at the edge of a precipice, the sea lapping at her feet and fog roiling at her back. In the distance, specks of candlelight offered warmth like Christmas lights through frosted glass. She ignored them, content with the salted air that glowed faintly under soft moonlight. Though the air was chill by the sea and she wore little more than a sheer silken gown, she reveled in the energy that such nights fed her. Her bare toes curled in the soggy earth and damp grass. Feelings sent such a charge through her that she had half a mind to shed her gown, shed everything, and roll around until she became one with it. It was not the first such night for her. Lately they came more and more frequently, and she often found herself waking up covered with the remnants of such strolls. Leaves in her hair and clothes still damp from late summer storms, mud-caked legs, and the dazed thought of having left something behind that she could not quite place. It was as if she were sleepwalking, but she knew for certain that she was awake. Memories drifted about inside her. They did not burn away with the morning dew, but left her intoxicated and dizzy, just as though they truly were dreams all along. So again and again, she came back to the edge of the world just beyond the fences of her home when real sleep eluded her. There are places in this world, her father would tell her when candles burned low, where the earth speaks. They call us to them with their power, to give us the knowledge they have if we could only hear them. He told her of some of these places, strained though his words were, as if he had to pluck them out like deeply embedded splinters. The girl, enraptured by them all the same, ignored the presence of necessity that clung to them, that slight poison that they were more than mere stories to entertain her in the evenings, also an obligation to pass on before it was too late. She was too young to understand them all. She had no idea what great canyons and mammoth spires of tree trunks should look like, let alone why people would be drawn to them. She knew only pockets of rain, low hills of emerald, cushy grass, and pine forests far older than she could comprehend. Still, she listened with all her heart and closed her eyes to dream of foreign lands. It was only later, much later, that she realized her home was one of those places her father spoke of, a detached area of the world that beckoned to restless souls with its forgotten language. On some primal level, she understood that they did not live normal lives or reside in a normal place. In the cabin by the sea, she knew of a life of serenity, a gentle peace of mind that permeated through the air itself to quell unrest. There were no visitors, no enemies. She was safe and cared for and wanted for nothing. Until the night began to call. If her father knew about her sojourns, he said nothing of it. In the cabin he was asleep, or at least feigned sleep, as she glided out to the cliffs. Maybe he was truly unaware. Maybe he wanted her to discover those stories for herself. She did not need convincing. She believed in those exotic places. She believed in all of them. She believed deeply and wholly until one night she felt the irresistible urge to leave the cabin. She was moved to her feet as if pulled by an unseen spirit, and soon found herself panting for breath in the open fields beyond her front door. They were the same fields she had always known, the only fields she had ever known. Yet the crisp air felt new and wholesome and filled her with strange moments of clarity, a unique awareness of time and place and beauty towards her surroundings. Nothing moved but the wind over her chest. The stillness of the world kept under her watch till the first shades of dawn. All was the same each time, though not always to the same place. It sprang on her suddenly and completely until she left to explore the rolling hills and ancient woods or rocky cliffs, innately knowing she was alone and no harm would come to pass. She was simply answering something rumbling within her that would make itself known with time, something that would bear the first markings of conflict on her soul but would also protect her if she only accepted it. So that night, like so many other nights, she stood tiptoed on the cliffside as the mist soaked through her hair and her gown clung to her body like a second skin. She swayed to the pounding of the waves below as goosebumps ran up her tall, lithe legs and raised the fuzz on her arms not yet marred by time. Each crash below melded with the breeze-touched whistle of grass to create a harmonious rhythm that delighted her soul. As she waited, she closed her eyes and grasped at the music until the world sang in a melody only she could hear. Places of power did exist. The earth did speak. There, for the first time, she learned she could listen. Thank you. And that will conclude my story time for today. I know this was but a brief respite, but I hope that you had fun listening to my stories and will try to come up with new ones in the future. This was, of course, but a test, something to help the wayward souls and attempt something new, traffic notwithstanding. I hope to do these again in the future with not just original stories, but maybe I will try and find a few in the public domain that we can read together. Maybe some holiday themed ones in the future. But I had a lot of fun. I hope that if nothing else, this would calm you in the evening hours when I know that sleep can be hard to come by. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Wes, your storyteller and librarian for the evening. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe. See my other content in the future. You all have a good night and sweet dreams, everybody.